Hello everybody, and thank you for coming to this LDC Via webinar. Before we start, I'm going to talk for just a couple of minutes about LDC Via, both about the people and about the product, to give you some context. And then we'll go straight in with Matt White, who will present the product with some live demonstrations. My name is Julian Woodward. I'm one of the 4 founders of LDC Via, the other 3 being Matt White, who you'll hear from in a minute, Ben Poole, and Mark Myers, and you'll see our lovely faces on your screens now. I hope if you can't see our lovely faces on your screens, please let us know in the comments. If you've attended some of the industry conferences like IBM Connect, Lotus Spheres of old, Engage, Icon UK, MW Log, you may well have met us in the past or even seen us presenting. Between the 4 of us, we are proud, yes, we're proud to say we have about 80 years of experience with Notes and Domino in total, mainly from an application development standpoint, and that is our take on things. We are developers. So we do know how amazing Notes and Domino have been, are, but we also know some of the quirks and challenges of the platform. And we still use it now. We use it to deliver application projects for our clients. And as well as Domino, we have lots of experience in other platforms between us, covering Java, .NET, MeanStack, and all sorts of other things that we've had exposure to. So that's a little bit about us. It's probably enough. What is LDC Via? Let's talk about that for a moment. So LDC Via is primarily a platform to provide a new home for data that, for whatever reason, is no longer going to live on Domino. And there are a number of reasons why you might want to move data off Domino. If you've migrated email off Notes, but are still looking for a replacement for Domino for existing and future applications, and we're talking about the type of applications that Domino is typically used for here, so database workflow and collaborative sorts of applications. Or perhaps you want to downsize your Domino environment, so contain it, reduce the number of servers, but you need to keep data, and perhaps more data than you really have room for now. Or you want to extend and enhance applications and build new applications, but don't have the Domino skills in-house, and you don't necessarily have the desire to outsource your sort of mission-critical application development projects. So LDC Via has been sort of created to answer those types of challenges and problems. And we're going to look at it in 4 main ways, the 4 sort of big feature areas of LDC Via. Firstly, it's a Domino-like platform for data and for applications. So it's very similar in concept, in structure, in feel to Domino. Secondly, we have a set of tools to allow data to easily be migrated from Domino into LDC Via. Thirdly, we have some point-and-click tooling to allow quick application building, think notes and forms and views type applications. And lastly, we have a comprehensive set of REST-based APIs to let your developers loose and get stuck in with stuff. So before we get to the demo, I just wanted to say a couple of words about the platform itself. So what we've set out to do is to try and make sure that you have the easiest possible path for getting data out of Domino without losing any data and without losing any of the functionality of the data. And you'll see what I mean by that when we get a little bit later. So that one critical thing is that there's no need to spend ages analyzing the data and remodeling it to try and squeeze it into a SQL relational type structure. We took the opposite approach, and we've taken the view that what's needed is a system that understands Domino data, really gets it, that understands that not all of the documents of a given type, so all the appointments in a diary, all of the people, will have exactly the same data structure. You know, you have your classic, if you've been a Notes or Domino developer, you have the classic situation of of a field that was a numeric field that then became a text field. So different documents have different versions of that piece of data. And also then the platform needs to know about very Domino specific things like readers and authors fields and response hierarchies and rich text and file attachments. And that's what we have built LDC Via for. So without any further delay, let's hand over to Matt, who will talk about and demonstrate some of these areas. Over to you, Matt.
Hi there, everyone. So thanks to Julian there for doing the sort of the warm-up. What I thought, basically what we're going to do for the rest of the session today is really just, rather than looking at slides, we're actually just going to look at the product. We're going to go through the various steps that Julian was talking about there. So we're going to look at the platform itself, which you should be able to see on your screen now. So it's a web interface to get to all of your data. And we're logged in at the moment to the home page of the application, logged in as the administrator for an organization where we have 7 databases that we can see. We can see some statistics about those databases. We can also see some statistics about activity that's been going against those databases. And we can also administer all of our users and everything like that. But the first thing that you're going to want to do when you start using LDC Via is actually migrate some data across to the environment. And we've got 2 ways of doing this. The simple, pretty way is the first one that I'll do, and this is really very, very simple indeed. There are 3 fields, and that's all that you have to do basically. So there are a couple of requirements. You do have to have enabled the Domino data service on your Domino server, and it needs to be internet facing. And we understand that this is maybe not realistic in every situation, but it's good for demos, and if you've got a simple environment, it's a nice simple way of getting data across. So I'm going to migrate a very simple document library database across from one of our servers, and I'm going to enter my Domino username and password, and then just agree to the, oops, if I can click correctly, agree to the licensing terms, and then it's gone off to the Domino server and has loaded up all of the views that are in that database that I can then click on to say I want to migrate all of the documents in this view. And in this case I'm going to choose all documents, and it is now working. So it's looping through every document in the view, and it's actually finished already. Admittedly, this was a very small database because it's good for demos, but what we've got here is this document library database has come across where we've got 8 documents and 3 response documents have come across. So it's a very simple process indeed. We've not really had to do anything at all for it to pick up this data. If I click on a document, you can see all of the fields that have come across. And we're going to look at those in a bit more detail in a while. But before we get on to working with the data in LDC Via, I'll show you the other way of doing the migration. And that's based inside the Notes client. So what we did previously was using a web browser, and it relied on you having your Notes databases exposed to the internet, and there are many, many reasons why you might not want to do that. So the alternative is that you download this NSF from our support site, and then you can actually run this tool inside your Notes client against one or more databases on a server, or every database in a directory, or indeed every database on a server if you wanted to. And you basically just configure this document to say these are the instructions that we're going to run with. So in this case, I'm running my server called Surface Book. We're going to migrate the same database across. It's called demos.library.nsf. We're going to look for we're going to convert by form. That means we're going to go and get every document in the database, and we're going to convert them using the forms that they are associated with. You can also use by view if you want to, which is another reason. There are reasons why you might want to do that, but we won't go into those now because we'll try and keep this not too nerdy, basically. we've got various other bits of configuration. So one of the things that the web migration can't do is do things like generating users and groups and ACL roles. So in the notes migration utility, you can configure this to say every time we come across a notes name of any form and that user doesn't exist in LDC Via already, then create that user in LDC Via. Similarly with groups and with ACL roles. So you can choose to migrate every single bit of configuration about document level security across to LDC Via. For that, you obviously need to provide an address book, views to get that data from, and then we've got some configuration to say these are the license keys that I'm going to use to migrate the data. This is the target server that we're going to send data to, and all of those sorts of things. And then I'm going to simply click Save and Run, and the migration is actually happening on a different screen for me, but I'll just drag that across, and you can see that it's just chugging through those documents now. So this is doing exactly the same process we saw on the web server. So it's come across 8 documents there. It's come across another 8 documents, which it's found through the alias of those documents. Then it's processed the responses, and it is done. So if I go back to my database viewer page in the browser, you can see that we've got another new database has appeared where it's picked up the name of the server being Surface Book, the path of the database, and we've got 8 documents and 3 responses. Excuse me, just coughing there. So we've migrated that data across. Where we can now actually start working with that data inside the inside LDC Via. So when a database comes across, we've got various settings that we can play around with at the database level, and then settings that we can play around with at the view or collection level. So we call each group of documents a collection. So in this case, we could, for example, change the title of the database. So we'll call this document library. We could say that we want to make it full text indexed. So by default in LDC Via, you can search using view style queries. So you can say, give me all of the fields which match this exact criteria, or give me all these fields that have some text string within it. If you full text index it, then that expands that capability to say that actually I want to do a full text search against all fields in a document, and we can look for word variants and misspellings and things like that as well. So it's a useful thing to turn on. We can say that the database is public access, or we can say it's immediately available to everyone in the current organization, or indeed everyone across all LDC Via users regardless of the organization. And we can just update those settings, and you can see that the title has changed. If we go down to the database, to the document level, you can see that we can go and click on an individual document, and we can see all of the fields that have come across. This document actually had a file attachment on it, and that has come across, and we're able to click on that and download it. We can choose to export that document as a PDF, so that you can get all of that data out for whatever reason you might want to get all of that data completely raw, as it were, and get that data and do something with it. And similarly, you can choose to export that data to Excel as well if you would choose to, so that you can do some manipulation on all of the fields in all of those documents. So the next step that you might want to look at is configuring things like readers and authors fields. This database that we brought across actually has in the notes environment a couple of has a readers field which has lists of notes names in that gives readers access to people, and we can configure what those fields are just by coming into this collection schema settings. So in this case, inventively, the readers field is called readers, and we can just change the data type of that field. And if we OK that setting now, that's now automatically applied reader level security to this view. So if we go and log in to this application, actually we just need to give a user access to this application. So if we go and find Fred, and we'll go and give him access to where are we, document library, give him access to that, and then we'll log in as Fred in a different browser. So you can see that he's immediately got access to the database, and you'll notice that he only has access to 7 documents in that database, because there's 1 document where he is named as a reader and 6 documents that have no readers on, and there's 1 document where he doesn't have access to that because someone else is named as a reader. So it works in exactly the same way as you would expect Notes and Domino reader and author level security to operate. And I'm going to let Julian just summarize at this point while I get ready for the next stage of the demo.
Okay. I hope you're enjoying it so far. If you have any questions, please do use the webinar tool to send them to us. We'll do our best to answer them within that context if we can. And if we need to answer them at the end, then we will do that instead. So far we've looked at the migration tooling, which moves data from Domino into LDC Via, and we've looked at some of the settings you can use to define the data once it's in place. Now what we're going to do is move up a level and consider the data as an application, not just as raw data, and take a look from that perspective. And I will hand back to Matt.
Okay. So continuing in the document library that we just migrated, one of the things you may have just noticed is that when I expand the document library in LDC Via, I get an option to open as document library. We've basically written a few templates for the most commonly used Notes and Domino applications. We've got templates for document library, we've got templates for team rooms, discussion databases, and mail files. So that's a read-only on the mail file. But basically what that means is we're able to identify databases that sort of match the pattern of a document library, for example, and I can log in to our template, so I can actually read immediately the data in a more usable format. So as an example here, we can see this is the private document for Jack, so this happens to be the one that Jack is allowed to see. I'm logged in as an administrator, so I can see everything. You can see the rich text field that's come across. If I look for one that's got some rich text in it, there's some formatting in these basically where you can see the grade text for the see attached file. We've got an attached PDF document in this case. I can add a response document, and that's immediately stored back into the database. We can search for data as we go in here. So it's basically a fairly basic but usable template that allows you to carry on accessing all of the data that you've migrated across from Notes and Domino in a format that hopefully your end users can use, or if this is data that's just been archived, that an administrator can come and find data in a friendly way without having to dig around in raw JSON data too much. We've done that work for them, hopefully. Excuse me. So that's the basic template, and the other templates that we've got are pretty similar. So we've used a standard open source library. So these templates are all written using AngularJS and Bootstrap. So they're all very customizable, and of course they're all open source on our GitHub page, so that you can take this code and use it to create your own applications if you need to. So that's sort of the most basic types of operation that we offer on top of the data migration. In terms of the next stage beyond that, if you've got a database that isn't covered by one of our standard templates, so as an example, I've got a directory of people that we migrated across that's got a couple of 100,000 records in it. We can't identify one of our existing templates to match onto this. So what we allow you to do is actually create your own very simple configuration-driven application. So without writing any code at all, you're able to create an application that you will be able to provide either again to your administrators or to your users. So as the example in this, we've got, as I say, a directory of data, so a fairly standard sort of information that you've got, company names, email addresses, first and last names, cities, states, all of those sorts of standard directory style information. What we can do inside the configuration for this collection is go and add a little more detail to these forms. So we can drag fields around to reorder them. So we could say that this is the order of things that we want to display on the document. We check fields to say these are key fields that we want to display to an end user as opposed to an administrator. We change the data type of each field to say, for example, the email is an email type data. The country field might be a combo box where we want to provide some options to users when they're creating new contacts. And you can also make fields mandatory as well. So very basic configuration that allows you to create a simple form for your users to be able to either view or edit data depending on the situation. And once we've done all of that configuration, we get the option to open the database with something that we called LDC Via Lens. This is essentially just another template, but it's one which is much more generic than the standard document libraries and discussions. So this is one where you have to do some basic configuration before you can actually use it. In this case, what we've done is identified that there's a collection called person, and it's gone and looked at the configuration that we've entered. So it's displaying the company name and the email address as the two first key fields. It's providing all of those bits of data to the form for the user to view. It allows us to put it into edit mode. We've got the combo box there where we can select from the list of options provided. If you're on a mobile device, then obviously this is scalable, and you can enter this would be identified as a URL field as an example, and so you'd get the correct keyboard and everything on mobile devices. All of those sorts of basic application development type things which should be done for you at this point. And that's sort of, it's useful, and there are it again is for static data or relatively static data. It lets you just have a nice pretty view onto it. We can also go back to the configuration of the database and create views of data. So there are 200,000 records in this database. That might be too much for someone to deal with. So as an example, if we wanted to have a view of everyone who came from the United Kingdom, then we can set up this filter where we can identify the field name country is equal to the value of United Kingdom, or we could add other criteria. You could say everyone from London, or everyone over a certain age, or whatever whatever it is that you want to go and search for. And if we go back to the database and go and look at that view, then you'll see that this has now come back with the UK people data set, which is much smaller than the 200,000. I think this is just 50,000 people, and you can see that it's still performant and all of those sorts of things. It's a really massively scalable application platform that we've created here. So standard Domino view limitations in terms of performance and those sorts of things don't really apply here. So we've got the view. The next thing that occurred to us as Domino developers is that we've got a whole bunch of fields here that are useful in and of themselves, but in this example we've got first name and last name fields are actually stored as two separate fields on the documents, but in a lot of cases we'd want to display full name. So we've created a feature called virtual fields, which in Domino terms you can think of as sort of computed for display. So we can add, for example, a full name field here. I'm just going to copy a bit of text here because I don't want to make a typo. So if I just copy that and paste in here, we can create a very basic computed for display style configuration where we're building up a concatenation of fields and static strings to create our full name field. So if I just save this and you'll notice immediately that when we come back to this view, we've now got a full name field being displayed. That's not actually stored in the database, that's computed live whenever any request is made to get a document. And if we just go and reconfigure our collection schema, make sure that full name is displayed first, and just say OK to that. And we'll come back to, I think we just need to reload this page. You can see now that when we come into the view here, we're displaying the full name of each person rather than their company. You can see the full name is displayed over here as well. When we go into edit mode, full name isn't displayed because it doesn't exist on the document, so that's not something that a user is able to edit. But it's useful stuff for being able to create applications. And that virtual field feature is available for use in any situation, so it's part of the API so that you can use it within your own applications to store data or to store configuration to drive how the application works. So that's LDC via Lens, and Julian's just going to wrap up again, and then we're going to get even deeper into the nerdy stuff after this.
Hello. So what we've looked at here, as I said, we've sort of taken a step up, and we now look at Domino data as application data rather than as the raw data we were looking at it before. And we've looked at two ways to do that. One is using the pre-built application templates for discussions and team rooms and document libraries. Those three are all full read-write working applications. There's another which is the mail file. That is read-only. The intention there is not that we build an email platform, because we have no desire to do that, but the intention there is that we allow you perhaps to send mail archives that users have created and send those into LDC Via and get them off your infrastructure, tying up disk space, tying up backup space, whatever, and you can shift those off to one side. So that's why we've built the mail version, and that has some nice features as well, which you can ask us about if you're interested in that. So we've looked at LDC via Lens, and of course that is using the same readers and authors fields as the raw data views that you were seeing before. So you're getting a picture here that we're building up a sort of forms and views, application development, point and click type capability. But now we're going to take a look at it from a developer's perspective. Just before we do that, and in case there are people who will run scared from source code, which I understand, firstly, as a thank you for coming on the webinar, we'd like to make you a special offer, and that is if you sign up for a paid account level. So we have a free level, which is free forever, and that's fine. But if you sign up for the paid account level, we will give you the first 3 months for free as well. So that will be removing some of the limitations on the free level. The free level is pretty much fully functional, but it has limitations on the amount of data you can store. So to do that, you will need to use the code JAN16, JAN16, when you sign up. I'll give this information again at the end, and if you forget it, drop us an email and we'll send it out to you. Secondly, just before we go kind of on with the show, we would like to get your feedback on this webinar. So if you would be happy for me to give you a ring at some point in the next few days, just to get your feedback really and let us know how we did, please could you send us your phone number either in the chat box in the Q&A bit or by email to info@ldcvia.com, and you'll see that address on the screen at the end. And if you prefer, put in the day and time that you'd like me to call you. And that info@ address is also the address that you can use for any questions that we've not answered adequately, you think of after the webinar's finished, or if you try to sign up and you have any problems signing up. So that's enough from me for now, and back to Matt.
Okay, so I promise not to get too nerdy. The thing that I want to try and make as clear as possible is that everything we've shown you here is developed using the API. So really, the thing that we've spent most time on are the migration utilities, and then the creation of the API that allows you to create applications that talk to the LDC Via backend. So everything that we've done with the templates and everything else is using the API. We're not using any secret source to build anything ourselves. There's no hidden things. There's just the API that allows you to go and get data, to modify data, to go and do things with the data as you see fit, basically. So in terms of the documentation of this, we spent what seemed like days and days and days writing documents for all of the different functions that are available to you, and everything that we've written is public so that you can then go off and write your own applications. Everything that you do with the API revolves around authentication. So every operation that you have to perform against the API, you have to send your API key, which is something that you find by going to your profile in the system, and you get this key here that basically identifies you to the API to be allowed to perform an operation that allows us to compute whether you have the rights to do whatever it is that you're asking. There is also an API to actually perform a login so that you can send in a username and password and get back an API key so that you can have your users log in to a system without them having to understand the nerdity that goes with API keys. In terms of the API itself, basically starting at the highest level, you're able to get a list of all of the databases that you have access to within the system. Once you get a database, you can go and get details about that database. So all of those settings, like things like the indexed option, whether it's read-only, whether it's public access, other details about it. You can obviously modify some details, so you can change the title, you can change the index property and all of those sorts of things, or you can choose to delete an entire database. Some of these operations are restricted to people with elevated rights, so deleting databases, for example, is limited to people who are administrators within the organization. Inside a database, you have a list of collections. A collection is a group of documents that have the same form name, basically. So within that, you can go off and get a list of all of the collections in the database, and that returns to you the name of the collection and the count of the number of documents that you are allowed to see. So again, we're able to operate all of these things in real time to give you access to counts of this is a view of people that has 200,000 people in it. You can see 197,000 of them or whatever. We're able to perform at that level where we can do all those calculations live. We can get all of the documents within a collection. So this is where you get the meat of the application data, basically. So you can start looping through documents. You can get all of the rich text. Rich text is funny. In Domino, if you've ever worked with it in any detail, then you'll know how painful that can be. So we've done a lot of the work that basically we bring across the data from Notes and Domino, and we don't touch that data at all. What we do is we read it and we try our best to pass that to HTML. So it might have come across as base 64, it might come across as plain text, HTML text, it might come as quoted printable text, all sorts of different options. We'll do our best to convert that to HTML for you. But the original rich text field content is always there for you to go and work against if you would prefer to do that. So you always end up with two fields basically on the document in Via. In this example here, we've got body and body past that you can work with there. You have the option to delete a collection. You can search within a collection, and this is again one that you're going to end up using a lot. So the search syntax allows you to filter against individual fields, groups of fields. You can do equals, you can do contained, you can do less than, greater than, all of the sorts of things that you would expect to be able to do. And then you can do a full text query as well. And you can mix and match those. So you could have everyone in the UK whose name begins with Bob or Robert sort of thing. You can mix and match all of those queries to match your requirements. Views, again, we showed you very briefly the ability to create these saved configurations of filters that get applied to collections. So this is a way of storing that, making that available to different people in different situations. And then working with documents. You can obviously get an individual document, you can get all of the attachments and rich text off a document, you can insert new documents, update existing documents, delete documents, and do all of those things that you would expect to be able to do down at that very lowest level. File attachments have their own set of features where you can go and get individual file attachments and remove file attachments from individual documents as and when required. And then metadata, we didn't really talk about specifically, but every time that you're working with a collection, we try and summarize the details about that collection. So it will list all of the fields that we've located on documents within the collection, their data types, and all of those sorts of settings. And this is what allows you to control readers fields and authors fields, data types. But as Julian stressed at the very start, although you can say a field is a number field, we don't enforce that. So you can mix and match data types if you've got slightly dodgy quality data that's coming from Notes and Domino, then we're not going to penalize you for that. This is merely indicative sort of what you would like the data to be almost, but you don't have to be bound by those restrictions. In terms of the administration side of things, there's obviously you've got users, groups within the application so that you can maintain users that who have access to the organization, and then users that have access to individual databases, and obviously you can control all of their names and all of those sorts of things that would give them rights to documents by virtue of being included in readers and authors fields, and all of those things that basically you would expect to be able to do, you're able to do using this API. So you can either use our screens that let you manage all of these sort of settings, so you can see all of the users in the organization, you can see all of the names that are associated with them, the databases that are associated with them, or you can create your own UI to do all of that if you want to as well. We've got some utility classes, so I mentioned briefly that we can export to PDF. In the mail template, we can also export to EML format, so that if you want to get data out of an archived email database, you can do that and import that into Outlook or into a Notes client and just read that individual message. You can also export collections of data to Excel to do bulk operations against. You can get a useful one that we've added that I use a lot in the applications we create is getting the list of response documents for a document. So we can go off and immediately tell you every response to a document within the application. And all of those things are useful for building applications, and then from an audit side of things, every single operation that is performed gets logged within our log database, so that you can then search within those logs to say, give me all of the operations that happened against this collection by this person within this date range, sort of thing, so that you can go off and see who has done what and when to what, which should hopefully make auditors happy. And then obviously we've got, of course, you never write bugs in your code, but we do have some error codes that you can hopefully get a bit more detail on if things go wrong. So the point of all of this is that we've created this API that is as full-featured as we have been able to make it in the time. We're always making changes to it, and we're always looking for feedback on things that are going to make your life easier as developers, but it's certainly enough for you to go off and build applications as a starting point. And we've also included within all of this code samples for JavaScript developers and Java developers to get them started. We're working through on doing similar for .NET, but if there are other languages that are going to be useful for you to get going with, then hopefully we can provide those as well. And the point of all of this is that we're able to then go off and create applications. So as an example, I went off in a couple of days and just created a very basic blog template that is running as a Node.js application that I've deployed to Heroku, and this is talking to LDC Via on the back end. So if I go to my database viewer, you can see there's a database here called blog, and it's got 23 entries in it. So it's a very simple, basic template. From here, I'm able to authenticate using a Node.js plugin called Passport that just authenticates to my email address. I can now go off and create data using the API and store it in LDC Via. So if I click Submit, very excitingly, we've created a new blog post. If I come back here and just refresh this, you can see there's now 24. And if I go and just sort the data here, we should be able to see 2016. Here is the entry that I just created. So it's a very, very basic example, but it's showing that you're using the API. You can go off and create documents. You can modify them. I can go off and delete this, or I can do other operations against this document if I want to, and use that within other applications. And really the whole point is that this happens to be a Node.js application. It doesn't matter what platform it is that you're choosing to do your development on. It would equally work well with Java, with .NET, with I know, Python, with XPages if you wanted to. There's no reason XPages can't call back to LDC Via to pull data in and merge it into whatever it is that you're doing in your application development. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Julian for one final time.
Okay, so if you have any questions you've not already asked in the chat area, now would be a good point to do that. While that's happening, I thought I'd do a quick review of what we've seen. So we've looked how Domino data can easily be and quickly be migrated into LDC Via. We've looked at some of the standard capabilities when we take the raw data view with the searching and filtering and exporting. And we've looked at the standard database types where you've got document libraries and discussions and team rooms, and they are fully supported as working applications once they're migrated. We've seen how LDC Via understands a sort of very Domino-specific data concepts like readers and authors fields and rich text and response hierarchies, and how using the readers fields data can be, and authors fields data can be secured in LDC Via in a very similar way to the way it's secured in Domino. And we looked at the lens feature, which gives you an easy way to build simple sort of forms and views type interfaces onto data. And then we took a look at the APIs, which are pretty comprehensive, and they give you the ability to use LDC Via just as a back end. So it almost ignore everything you've seen in terms of user interface and think, what could you do as an application developer with the sort of Domino style concepts and data handling, but in whatever development tools and frameworks that you fancy using or is applicable to the particular situation. So it's a very kind of open, in that sense, environment. And we had a quick look at the blog template that Matt created on Heroku. I'm going to ask my colleagues whether there are any questions they want to jump in with that were asked in the chat or have come in on email or whatever.
Afternoon, Ben here. I was just going to say we've had a good lot of questions in the questions module, so thank you for those. I have been responding to them, and we will, or we can make available a summary of those questions and answers a little later. The most recent question we had is from Mr. Joe Lisson, who was asking whether we'd worked with documents that included such things as embedded views from Domino, and he was curious as to how they might come across, or in general, are there any limitations that are immediately come to mind in terms of converting documents, things like encrypted fields? So I was kind of tapping out an answer on that. So one aspect was this question of embedded views. We would regard an embedded view as very much a kind of application, for want of a better term, something that is in the application itself. It's application logic. So we're showing some kind of relationship between a document and other documents. So in terms of pulling the data over to the LDC Via platform, we would really just be interested in the document and any other documents that are coming from the application. So the embedded view would not come across because it's kind of an application control. So the idea there is that the end viewpoint, if you like, for a migrated application, be that a new custom template or some other kind of integration, that would then need to replicate the embedded view, if you like, if that was a business requirement for a migrated application. So it's just to make it clear that we're not migrating form controls, for example. We can recreate forms and views to some aspect to a certain extent with LDC Via Lens, but we wouldn't be bringing over things like embedded views, if that makes sense. I don't know if my colleagues want to jump in on any other aspects of that, for example, encrypted fields and so forth.
I've got it's a question and or feature that was asked for by Steve, who is I believe on the call, and his was a question via legal audit. In any synchronization or migration, depending on what you're going to do, if you had picked up Domino data and you had transported it to Via, if you got a legal audit requirement, the legal people would actually want to see the data untouched prior to it coming over here. We can provide them lots of audit information once it's over, but we need to be able to provide them from a legal standpoint that the data hasn't been butchered while it was transferred. And we do that feature as well. That was a feature request. So it's an option you can do on the migration utility to say, okay, provide an audit snapshot, and we do we compress the database that you're going to move across or sync across. We take an SH2 hash of it to prove it's exactly untouched. We then put it on the Via servers and present you with the SH2 hash so that you can store it. Then when your legal people come along, you can pull the database untouched back off the Via servers, compare it with the SH2 hash that you have got as part of your migration, and give it to your legal team as proof that the data was not fiddled with, and this is exactly the historical data you can need to take to court. So a migration or synchronization will not break your audit trail.
So there's a question from Roki King here. How do we handle imported pictures into a database? In terms of basically, whenever we come across imported images inside rich text fields, we extract those images as file attachments and store them related to the document that we're processing. But as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, whenever we're bringing across rich text fields, we also retain the original base 64 string that you can then operate on against yourself if you choose to. So that would be up to you as to whether you work with the attachment we create for you or the original unaltered rich text string.
Thanks, Matt. One thing we didn't show, and perhaps we could, while I know there are questions coming in, and Ben's doing his best to answer them as quickly as he can, was the ability to use LDC Via as a greenfield application development environment and not simply migrating data from Domino and taking migrated data and working with it. Is that something we could take a quick look at?
It is indeed. Yeah, I forgot to do that. So we've got, when we're in the database viewer page, we've got this button up here called New Database, and I can just create either an empty database, or I can create a database that already matches the structure of one of our standard templates. If I go for empty, I can simply do that, and then we've got an empty database. Why would you do that, you may ask? What we can actually do then is add new collections. So we could have a collection with a field on it that is a key field that's a string, and we can say OK to that, and we've now got a field in there, and we can then immediately start operating against that. Using the API, if you try and insert a document into a collection or a database that doesn't exist, we will actually automatically create that database and collection for you. So it's very easy using the API to create new databases, but you can also do that using the admin tools as well if you would prefer.
Lovely, thanks, Matt. Before we wrap up, it might be worth just taking a very quick look in true IBM style. I know we're coming up to IBM Connect, and take a look at the roadmap. Now, we don't have a fancy chart to show you, but we do have a couple of key features coming up in the reasonably near future. So I'll ask Mark if he were to talk about the synchronization approach, please.
Okay, so one of the main things that we were immediately asked by a lot of people was, you know, oh, is this just a migration? What I really want is to do a bolt-on to Notes. I don't want to replace Notes. We've got tons and tons of business hour and expertise and all the business logic. We just want to expand it. And so the bidirectional synchronization is releasing this quarter, so that you can take just chunks of your notes and synchronize it up and backwards and forwards. So it sits as a background agent or task, and make sure that the data is kept in sync. So if something's changed on Via, it pulls back down to Notes. So that means that you can keep all your existing notes and just add stuff onto it without having to rewrite stuff. You know, it's not just a migration, it's a migration and coexistence. We originally built Via, the seed that was formed into our mind was to break some of the limitations that we felt that we'd lived with Notes too long. You know, the sizing things, you know, we've done testing with millions upon millions of records, and we just wanted to break that. This is not just a everybody move off Notes. This is a synchronization, this is a coexistence thing.
Thanks, Mark. Ben, would you like to speak briefly about security?
Yes, certainly. I'll keep it fairly short and sweet, but this is quite timely because we had a question from Matt who was asking about alternative authentication, things like OAuth and obviously there's other things like OpenID. The path that we're pursuing at the moment is essentially offering single sign-on, if you like, an authorization using the SAML standard, which just means that we can configure identity providers which can work with LDC Via. So, for example, if an organization has Active Directory set up and they want to use that as their identity provider for all kind of third-party applications like LDC Via, for example, we will be offering that functionality very soon.
It was short and sweet, and you caught me on mute. Thanks. Are there any other questions coming in the chat that you want to cover, or should we start wrapping up? I'll start wrapping up and you can interrupt me if you need to be.
Yes, I'm still reviewing some of the questions, but thank you everyone for chipping in. It's been really useful, and we will have answers for the remaining ones that I haven't responded to yet. So thank you.
Thank you. So as I said before, we would like to get your feedback on this webinar. So if you would be happy to be contacted by phone, it will be me calling you. I hope that doesn't put you off too much. At some point in the next few days, just send us your phone number either in the questions and answers bit or by email to the email address that's on the screen at the moment. If you want to include a day and time that you prefer to be called, then let me know in that message, and I will do my best to meet that request. So far we're nearly at the end, but there's a few things I ought to point out. We're not going to cover in any detail, but I ought to flag up in case that there are concerns. We've looked at LDC Via as the sort of hosted cloud database platform. And that is our default kind of proposition. That's what we demonstrate. If you need it on premises, that is something that we can do as well. And also, while we provide the tooling to do the migration, we're also aware that perhaps you don't actually want to do that yourselves, or that a customer may not have the skills or the time or the desire to do that piece of work. So we can provide the people to do that and analyze what databases you have which are in use, and plan a migration that's going to be effective and give you the most value as quickly as possible. And also then, of course, build the applications. If you don't have the skills to do that yourself or the desire to do that yourself, then either using LDC Via Lens or using the APIs and using appropriate technologies, .NET or Java or whatever. And finally, just to remind you of that special offer, which is on the right-hand side of the screen at the moment. You do need to sign up for the paid plan. The free version is free anyway, so you don't need a coupon for that. But there are paid plans. They work on a monthly recurring fee basis. There's no minimum period or anything like that. It's a very simple model. There's the coupon code there, JAN16, Jan16, and that will give you 3 months with no charge. So with that, I believe we are done. Thank you again for attending. If you have any questions afterwards, do email them to that address, and we'll get them, or tweet them if you prefer, or talk to us on Facebook if that's what you prefer. Thank you for attending, and we look forward to speaking with you soon, and perhaps see some of you at IBM Connect in Florida in a couple of weeks. So that's all from me. Thank you very much, and goodbye from me, and goodbye from all of us, I believe.